Okay, hello and welcome everybody to First Page Sundays. My name is Tom Leveen. With me as ever is the lovely and talented Joy with her Joy mug. If you haven't joined us before, you probably have, but if on the off chance you haven't, I'm an award-winning author with 9 traditional novels out with Simon & Schuster, Random House, and a couple others, Harry Abrams and Sky Horse. Pretty cool. I'm also a Bram Stoker Award finalist, which I'm still to this day. That was a few years ago now. I'm pretty jazzed about that. So Shackled is about a girl who, named Pelly, short for Penelope, who her best friend was presumed kidnapped 5 years ago. And as a result of she didn't see it happen. Nobody actually saw the kidnapping happening. She just went missing suddenly. I believe at the mall. I changed it in the screenplay, so I think in the book it's at a mall. And as a result of that, Pelly developed pretty severe panic disorder, PTSD, which I happen to know a thing or two about, which we will talk about later. And the book begins as Pelly is trying to kind of will herself out back into the world again instead of being locked up in her home. And she's trying to wean herself off of her drugs, which is a bad idea. Don't ever do that by yourself, please. And sees a girl she thinks is her best friend in the company of this particularly creepy old guy. Manages to catch the license plate and takes it to the police and tries to report and say, oh my gosh, this happened. Police are like, yeah, we'll look into it. And then Pelly decides, I'm going to have to go track this guy down myself and save my best friend. And then hijinks ensue. They're not really hijinks. That's putting it pretty mildly. Yeah. But anyway, so that's kind of the plot. And thematically, of course, it's about a girl who is coming to terms with her own very deep-seated trauma and working through it. And whether she does that in a healthy way or not, I leave up to you. But it is definitely about trying to work through some of those things. And along the way, there are some, I think, fairly interesting discussions about mental health and emotional wellness and things like that. So in one sense, it was a lot of fun to write because it was stuff that I'm very, very well versed in, which is another topic we may cover in a few minutes because I have some thoughts about that. But on the surface, it's just a thriller, and things very fast-paced, and so if you're into mysteries, thrillers, that kind of thing, I think this would be a good Tom Leveen novel to get you involved in. So
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely,
cool. All right, let's do this. Can I have the book, please?
Oh yeah, I guess you can.
Thank you. Now, technically, this is one of the advanced reader copies, but I'm pretty sure it's the same as the printed copy. This is 2015. Wow, already. That went fast.
Yeah, it sure did.
All right, so this is chapter 1. Thank you. First page of chapter 1 of Shackled. Like a heart attack. That's the best way to describe it. I've never had one of those, not that I know of, but I'm pretty sure it feels just like that. Dr. Carpenter even agreed with my description, but I hadn't seen her in a few months. Maybe that was a mistake. You're late, Pelly, David said to me as soon as I walked in the door of Hole in the Wall Cafe. I didn't answer. Couldn't. When the attacks come, I can't really speak. Or if I can, all that comes out is stuttering, muttering stupidity. The Hole was a safe zone for me, a place I could trust. It took a while to attain that lofty status, and there aren't many such places. But I couldn't stay inside. I dumped my bag behind the counter before pivoting right back around and rushing outside, panting. That is it. That's page 1. Not a bad opening, like a heart attack. That's the best way to describe it. All right. I mean, the thing is, like it or not, heart attack is one of those emotional words that grabs you. So regardless of what else I'm putting into that first sentence, the first page, whatever, having emotionally laden words, words like hospital and courtroom, places like that, these are trigger words that immediately kind of go, whoa, whoa, they grab you just a little bit, regardless of what else happens. So that's not a bad choice. I like that we aren't introducing a lot of characters. We've got Pelly and David. We've named both of them in the first page, which is actually also important. Don't forget to actually name your characters in the first page or so. I'm surprised at how many manuscripts I run across where we can get through an entire page or more, and I still have no idea who's talking. So make sure you at least get a name, even if you haven't identified a sex yet. At least give us a name, something we can hang our hat on, so to speak. The question is, do you want to turn the page? That is the only question we really need to ask is, do you want to turn the page? And I'm inclined personally to turn the page because of what she's describing. if I have any experience, and I do, with panic disorder, anything like that, anxiety, I'm like, ooh, yep, I know where this is headed, or at least I feel like I know where this is headed, and I can identify with this character. So based on the topic and the voice alone, I'm in. I'm going to keep going. The question is, will anybody else? Will somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience in those things and does not recognize themselves instantly in the character, are they going to keep reading? I mean, technically speaking, this would be shelved in YA. You're not going to find it in the adult thrillers section, unfortunately. But again, if we were at con or at an event somewhere, I would not necessarily push it as a young adult novel. I would, depending on who it was I was talking to. If we find out that it's a teacher or a parent, we might suddenly kind of tilt the conversation into the young adult area.
Right.
If it's not, then I probably am not going to necessarily mention that and just focus on the thriller aspect and the mystery aspect. So just something to keep in mind. So given all that, I like the voice. It's very strong here.
As somebody who has only had what I would say are mental health issues in isolated points of my life, this was very I felt like it laid it out for somebody who is predominantly in like the outsider position of like trying to grasp and understand of what it's like to have a panic attack, or what this feels like, or what do these intrusive thoughts actually feel like. I felt like these first couple of pages really they drew me in, and they helped me understand what that was like. And so even though like my own history, I wouldn't immediately be like, oh yeah, that's totally what a panic attack feels like. I wouldn't necessarily bring that experience as a reader. It was something that helped like bridge the gap, that explanation right away. I like the voice. And I mean, there's just fun things. I'm totally going to move ahead because Tom isn't here, and I thought he was going to read more. There's more explanation, but there's this great interchanges between Pelly and David right away. And like you can hear, one of the things I like is that you can hear kind of, maybe not the panic, but like the all-encompassing nature of the panic attack in Pelly's head. You can hear that in the first couple of pages. You can also hear David walk this really interesting line of like naming the, hi, I'm a human and I'm in front of you and you're not acknowledging me at all. Like that thing of like, okay, something odd is going on here. You, Pelly, keep not acknowledging it, but I, David, am going to name it without being a jerk about it. Like he does it with a smile, and he does it, and so you can feel right away that he's somebody who cares, which is also interesting. I think particularly as we think about characters who maybe don't always present, particularly main characters, don't always present themselves as the most likable right away.
I'm reading one right now.
Like the whole she's in the midst of a panic attack. Like I have empathy for her as a character absolutely right away, but how she's treating David, I don't. And so the fact that he is clearly, he's got some level of investment in her, and like he's trying to be helpful and trying to be supportive, like through him I can kind of keep caring and keep investing in Pelly.
Okay, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, that's good. I'll take that.
And so the fact that those are things that are integral to the plot and how it all unfolds, and that you're able to do those things in the first couple of pages, I think is really important. You've laid the groundwork right off the bat to say, here's our, in terms of where the story goes, these are the two that are most important, and this relationship is going to be pivotal. Yeah. And I've bought into the relationship as well as the two of them individually.
Which is pretty important.
It sure is. Really,
because,
really,
yes,
really.
they are, if you're not familiar with the book, Those are the two characters we're going to follow for the rest of the story. So having an introduction that is not misleading, I think, is important.
That's a good way to say that.
Yeah, not it happens not intentionally necessarily in some novels, but there are certainly some openings where you're kind of introduced to somebody that then stops showing up, and you're like, well, then why?
Right.
So for those of you tuning in who are writers and who are working on stuff, something to be thinking about. This happens very frequently, I think, in novels. Laurie Anderson has talked about it in Speak. I know. I was going to say frequently. Sometimes there are characters in the first draft of your novel that you can very readily combine, whether that's two characters or maybe sometimes even three. You can kind of squish them together, mix them around a little bit, and come out with just one character. Particularly, I think, in adult genres where it's frequently going to be third person and you've got a bunch of characters kind of running around, a lot of times you can just squeeze those guys together and just focus on one character to deliver the news or to have the relationship or whatever. You don't have to have multiple characters doing things. It would have been very easy to have another barista here at Hole in the Wall or whatever and have a thing with Pelly, and then she goes home and then talks to David, the neighbor, or something like, you know what I mean? And that just... Keep them together. Try to squish those characters together as much as you possibly can. So here is, I don't know exactly what genre this is, but it's looking like it's definitely an adventure and possibly science fiction.
Okay.
Possibly fantasy. I'm going to guess fantasy, but we're going to see what happens here. If for any reason you are new tonight, just a reminder that we do not name the author unless the author wishes to be named, in which case they are more than welcome to do that in the comments. Okay? So, here we go. This is The War of Ages. Outgunned and outnumbered, the Wolven race lost the Great Thrasher War. Lost is not the proper word. Even decimation is a mere euphemism. For the suffering inflicted by Thrasher to Wolven, annihilation would have been even a sweet godsend. Every Wolven city, every Wolven town, their entire civilization was devastated in a matter of months. The Thrasher had prepared well, and they were intent on tasting the fruits of their aggressive labor. As for the Wolven, they were forced into the wilderness. The great meadows and forests of Fertalia were now vacant, casualties of the Great Plague and Thrasher industrialization. Forced to live on scraps, the Wolven race retreated inward, learning to find value in detachment, compassion, and pursuit of justice for all. Meditating on the consequences of victory, the Thrasher race attempted to build a just society, free from Wolven custom and superstition. Convening a council of warriors, clerics, industrialists, poets, and engineers, the ruling class made haste to build the perfect society. This is the story of two races, two fates, two hearts beating as one. As conflict escalates and mutual destruction draws nigh, many pray for a salvation that may never come. Or perhaps it will. Dragon, the Wolven Prince of Ages, and Remulus, the diminutive Prince of Fasting, both seek answers to the oldest questions. How can peace be found in suffering? How can justice deliver itself when wrongs need righting? And how can two races of mutual enmity find compromise in a world yielding to none? This is a journey that will span continents, with friend and foe alike. Tundras will be endured, lessons will be learned, and sacrifices will be made. As the Great Spirit has said since time immemorial, with each step taken, one is forgotten. Ooh. I'm going to keep going a little bit. That sounds like a prologue. Frostmane shuffled his paws silently through the frozen landscape. Bending his neck to the snow, he processed one scent after another. Finding the current of blood and sweat, Frostmane sprinted southwise. Frostmane steeled his excitement and rage into focus and resolve. Leaping more than running, he finally caught up to his enemy. The bear with green fur, Grassworthy as he was known, was casually catching fish in the Arctic stream. Frostmane could still smell the scent of his wolven pups on the bear's gnarled teeth and flung into a rage atop the bear's hunched shoulders. Frostmane dug all four claws deep and sank his teeth firmly into Grassworthy's thick skin. The green bear roared violently and stood on his hindquarters, vigorously attempting to shake Frostmane off his back. Frostmane managed to hold on with his teeth firmly vised and left front claw gripping the bear's shoulder. Grassworthy dropped to all fours and began a wild gallop. Charging like a bull, he rammed Frostmane into a nearby ice wall. Keep going. Frostmane lost his grip and fell limp in the snow. Bleeding into and out of consciousness, he tried but failed to rise to continue the fight. Panting air, unable to move and utterly defeated, Frostmane looked toward the laughing bear strolling toward him. As images of his limp children entered his mind, Frostmane willed every broken bone and torn joint in his frame to bring him to his feet. Facing his executioner, the wolf charged forward. I think we'll stop there. Maybe I wasn't supposed to read all that. I don't remember now. In any case, that's a good place to stop. Well, so fantasy of some kind. Very good. I'm going to start with this opening because I just want to clarify. I don't know if the writer's here. I would love to clarify if that opening is what would be like if you turn to the first page, if that's what we would be reading, or if that's part of like a query letter. I couldn't quite tell because it had similarities to both, and it shouldn't. So for everybody else, because this struck me as a prologue, but then towards the end, that last paragraph, which I did not like at all. Yeah, tundras will be endured, lessons will be learned, and sacrifices will be made. That is not the strongest writing, and everything else is so strong, you can get rid of it, in my estimation. You can absolutely pull all of that, but again, it really depends on if this is a query letter or if it's more of a prologue. In either case, I think you can get rid of that because you've already done such a good job prior to that paragraph, this backstory, that at first I wasn't sure what to make of it. I wasn't sure what to do with it, but it's just... I think it hits I think it hits that fantasy prologue note rather well, minus that last paragraph. I think it reads like the kind of thing that a fantasy reader would be like, cool, I'm in, because it's giving us enough to kind of get our footing, figure out where we are, and then jump into the story. Now, into the story, I love the name Frostmane. That's cool. I love Grassworthy, the green bear. Those are awesome. Those are great hooky words. Hooky names that I like, and they sound super fantasy. I love Frostmane and Grassworthy. I can say those names, and I love that I can say them, and I love that they're these cool compound words that sound fantastical. That is awesome. I also love that once we get into the actual fiction part of the story, it's just action. Like, bam, we're in a fight scene, and we know who these two characters are, roughly. We don't know a lot about them, but we're rooted, so we're still coming in off the opening, so okay, we're good. And then even before we've turned the page, it feels like we know that this bear has killed the children of Frostmane. So like, okay, I'm in. Let's get this guy. Yeah. You know, these are great emotional hooks. Yeah. I feel like this is a genre that you read. Like, I would not have come up with this. I have written fantasy, but my fantasy still sounds like me, I think. I'm pretty sure, which hopefully is good. We'll find out here in a few weeks. But this feels like somebody who is rooted in the genre and already has a sense of the poetry there, which is good. Right.
I heard as the wolf, and I'm sorry, I missed...
Frostmane. I'm sorry, I can't see it now. Frostmane
was leaping on, and you were describing like some of the fight. I feel like fights are notoriously, or at least the beginning of the fight with the bear. Then there's, I think fights are really hard to describe with words, frankly. It's just one of those things I just find that is a really hard translation for the words from the author into my own mind. But I followed this. I understood, and and it didn't feel like my brain was having to like work hard to get there. And I'm not a fantasy reader. I'm not, so maybe that's just me. But I appreciated that as somebody who doesn't necessarily read these kinds of this genre necessarily, you did a good job with that piece and the physical movement and
yeah, I agree with that. And I think I wonder if maybe that's the thing that I was missing from the writing but should not be missing. And what I mean by that is, given that it is a fantasy, it's some subgenre of fantasy, that I would have expected a little bit more lyricism, a little bit more poetry, some more sensory type of things. But reading through it again, I mean, you've got scent, you've definitely got visual here, you've got sound. They're just very, I'm going to use the word generic, not in a bad way, standard, like roared. Okay, well that's a sound, so that's good, but it's roared. We know what roared is. There's nothing to make your take on the roar doesn't seem to be in here. It's just a roar. Does that make sense? Same with like I love the Frostmate could still smell the scent of his woven pups on the bear's gnarled teeth. Love it.
Oh.
Right. Yeah. Right.
I think that was one of the first sentences I caught.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I hope I can spin this correctly. So I love that. It's another scent, or excuse me, sense that's not just visual. So I like that, but it's not very detailed. And so on the one hand, being fantasy, I would expect a little bit more about what that's like, maybe on an emotional level or some kind of other sensory level, what it's like to smell your children on their killer. Like, that's intense. Having said that, and based on what you just said, maybe no. Maybe leave it and don't make it more poetic and fantasy. Like, let it go. It's doing its job.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, particularly not in the first page. Like, maybe if there's something like later on in, you know, that those things come back. I'm thinking back to what Michael Stackpole said last week and even Joe the week before of like, what are the most important things you want to get in, like, right off the bat? And
what are the 6 things we need to know?
Yeah, what are the 6 things we need to know? And what the emotional reaction was to the scent of your children on their killer. We got all kinds of pages for that. And the reality is that in a fight, you're not having, like, animal or not, you don't have the wherewithal to have to be aware of those kinds of emotional reactions. So this is me. I'm not a fantasy person at all.
No,
don't go there yet. I hope that you go there in another part of the work. But I think first page, you have told us what we need to know.
Yeah.
This bear is bad. This is. The stakes could not get any higher.
So by adding more of my frou-frou stuff, you're actually detracting from the scene, in a sense. Like, we need to
I think in the first page, yes.
Let the drama be the drama. Somebody, actually, I learned that in a class. One of my teachers, I believe it was Tara Eisen at ASU, said something along the lines of, like, you're in the kitchen and someone pulls a knife on you. You don't have to spend a paragraph talking about the knife because, oh my God, there's drama. Someone just pulled a knife on you.
Right.
That's it. And I think that applies to this scenario. So I was kind of looking for more, but I think Joy's absolutely right. I think you're fine. Leave it as it is.
Take it for what it is.
Yeah. I think that's a good call. I think that's the smart call. So well done, Vinny. Yeah, great start, man. So before I go on to our next one, that paragraph that I mentioned at the end of the like prologue part is almost a direct quote from Family Guy, where Stewie is making fun of Brian, saying, "Oh, how's that novel coming along? Yeah, friends become enemies, enemies become friends. Yeah, a little bit of growth at the end there. Yeah." Like, because as usual, Seth MacFarlane just nailed it.
Right.
Like, Seth MacFarlane, but he was absolutely right, and that paragraph sounded a lot like Stewie. So as soon as I read that, I'm like, I'm out. I can't handle it. I'm just gonna start laughing. That's just me. But yeah, it was. The rest of it was strong enough that I just don't think you need it. But again, it depends on what you're doing with it. All right, so this... Oh, damn it, I went too far. Okay, so the author specifically requested the name drop. So the author here is Joey Robert Parks.
Hey, Joey.
Hereafter known as Joey.
Good to see you again.
Yeah, and this is Joey's first page of a story called Dogs Don't Bark in the Hood No More. And I have not read this before, so forgive me. In an abandoned house that was once beautiful and stately 2-story home in the epicenter of the North St. Louis neighborhood, just north of Martin Luther King Drive and south of the Mississippi River, in what was commonly referred to as College Hill, a wreck of humanity, decades beyond her true age of 30, shuffled back and forth across the room, her nose practically up against one of the walls. The white woman was pale, bleary-eyed, bloated. Her hair was thin and sparse. She was anemically thin. Scabs dotted her face, neck, and bare feet. She clenched her jaw as she repeatedly picked at spots on her arm. She kept saying that bugs were crawling under her skin. Seated a few feet away from her, atop a large pile of red-baked bricks in the corner, sat a curly-haired 12-year-old black boy without a single skin blemish. Soft light fell through the roofless corner of the room and illuminated the 7-Eleven Big Gulp Big Gulp logo on the side of the cup the boy drank from with a large straw. Does it usually take this long, Mia? The high-pitched boy shot out like an impetuous child to the pacing woman. Mia stuck her arm out behind her back and, still shuffling, not turning around, flapped her hand and shushed him quiet. Sorry, the boy cowered. I just... Manny! Mia yelped. Sorry. Shush, hun, Mia said, instantly caring, but calculated. She turned abruptly to face him and grinned a mouth of rotting, yellowed, and cracked teeth. She lifted her bare feet and climbed the red brick mound to the boy like a veteran firewalker who showed no evidence of pain. Well.
Jeez Louise. All right, Joey.
That was fun. Well, we have to talk about voice, because that is the number one. If you guys could, I tried to read it as close to the voice as I was seeing it on the page. And we literally, that first sentence goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines. 5 full lines. So it is one big-ass sentence. And if any of you think I'm going to complain about it, you're wrong, because I liked it. You can do that. There is a way to do it, and I think Joey was successful here with it. Now, this feels, having no idea where this is going, this could go in a number of different directions right now. We have no idea what genre this is, okay? There's a lot of things it could be. It strikes me as perhaps a short story, but that's just me. Because it feels quite literary to me. It's got a very literary bent to it. Now, I could turn the page and it could go into, Dragon's Attack or something. I have no idea. But it feels at the moment, just for reference, so Joey, so that you know, I read literary, at the very least, contemporary. I mean, there's enough, I'm intrigued enough by this relationship. I want to know what the hell's going on. And we don't know what year, 7-Eleven. Okay, so it's contemporary. We know that much. Yay, super big gulp, or big gulp anyway. So usually take this long, Mia, the boy. So there's some like, structural construction things that I would want to change and like a line edit sort of thing. I think, maybe. But right away on page 1, does it usually take this long? Well, does what usually take this long? Shit, now I gotta turn the page.
Yes.
Right? So that's great. And good voice. They have good voices. Their dialogue is distinguishable, which is good.
Yes.
Didn't introduce a lot of characters, which is good. And definitely, we know what she looks like. Notice, everybody, if I'm not mistaken, we don't know what she's wearing. Do we? Nope.
That's interesting.
But I guarantee you all saw her.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what anybody else saw. I saw some kind of, like, nightgown. Like, full-body nightgown type of thing.
Definitely in, like, the house dress.
Yeah.
Kind of, yeah.
But he never said that.
No.
Which is to be applauded, Joey. Well done there. You gave us all of these other things, and we filled in those blanks, and that is fantastic.
In terms of the long sentence to open it up, so here's some things, and I don't know if everybody else has, like the world starts narrowing, like this edge, you've got the whole globe, and then like this edge comes in because you've said something, and then this edge comes in, and all of a sudden you have a very like clear picture of where we are. That's what I felt every time you were saying. You gave us a different piece of information. So we've got an abandoned house, okay? So that narrows in a beautiful and stately 2-story home. Okay, like that's telling me that's narrowing. In the epicenter of the North St. Louis neighborhood. Anybody knows anything about St. Louis? Like, again, zooming in. North of Martin Luther King Drive. But south of the Mississippi. I mean, like, again, like you are putting place.
It's like literally a Google Earth as you...
Yes,
into this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so... like those 3 lines that
this is still the first sentence, by the way.
Yeah, still part of the first sentence, that like so centers us in, like almost immediately the place becomes a character right away. Before you've even got to, and you introduce her as a wreck of humanity. I mean, like, okay, all right.
We all know what that is.
Right, exactly. But like those 3 lines like immediately centered me. And I think that's really impressive. And it's not only what you said, and I'm really curious where you're going to go with this, but it's also place. I mean, you said it in St. Louis. You said it in a very particular neighborhood, an area of St. Louis. I'm really, like, as a sociologist, I'm really interested in what's happening next. Like, what yarn are you going to spin from here?
And it better be a character at that point. I would also add to that. If you are going to zoom in that tightly, it better be a character. Place. We better get a sense of place. I know jack about St. Louis. I have no idea. But I know enough about what you have in that first sentence to know that it's not my home. This is a very different place from where I grew up.
Correct.
Because we don't throw around words like this. We don't have the Mississippi River. I mean, the Mississippi River is pretty iconic. Martin Luther King Drive. We don't have any of those in Phoenix, right?
We have one in Phoenix.
Of course we don't. So it's not that doesn't mean anything to me. It's just that it drives home the point that, this is not my neighborhood at all.
Right, that this is different.
So when I continue reading... I want you, as creator God of this universe, to serve me this area as something that I can, as an outsider, really taste and get a sense of the textures and everything like that. So I hope you continue to do that as the pages go on. At 98,000 words, you've had plenty of room to do it, so I expect good description there. I was good. Now, normally, those of you who know me well, normally I would pin Joey to the wall for all the uses of the word was. That's one of my big things. You got to get rid of that word was. Try to reshape any sentence you can with the word was. However, this is one of those exceptions where I said, nope, don't do it. Leave it as it is. My favorite example, and I don't think I can bring it up quickly, is Ray Bradbury, and I think it's, is it The Halloween Tree? I think it's The Halloween Tree, where he says, it was a small town by a small lake, by a small thing, in a small Midwestern town in a Midwest state. But it's this, grammatically, it's an awful sentence, but it's such poetry.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's the way only Bradbury can say it, right? And he uses these sort of common lowbrow words like was, to just hit this cadence. But he does it where it's very, if you go back and count the cadence, it's actually very, very close to iambic pentameter. Very close.
That's
it's got
crazy.
a bum. He's got this beautiful rhythm. And if you're going to open with or use a lot of longer sentences, you want to try to manipulate your prose into that. You may as well go, if you're going literary, man, go all in and really get out the nuts and bolts and scalpels and play with that kind of stuff, which I think you kind of already have here. So when we get to all of these was's, actually, everyone knows practically up against the wall, was pale and bleary and bloated, her hair was thin and sparse, she was anemically thin, was this, she was that. Like, yeah, but if it's got a heartbeat, keep it, and that has a heartbeat, I think. Yeah. So
I agree.
You get a pass on the was's on that particular paragraph. I like the veteran firewalker, but depending on what else happens in the story, it may not gel with the setting. It works on its own, but how do we? Is St. Louis known for firewalking? Is that where Tony Robbins is from? I don't understand. That takes us out of the setting. I think, even though it's a good description. I get it. That it was a strong visual image. Yeah, but make
You're
sure
saying it might not be grounded in this particular universe.
Specific place. Yeah, and maybe it is late. Maybe that becomes clear later. In which case, never mind. But at the moment, it doesn't gel with everything Joy just mentioned. It doesn't feel attached to the St. Louis neighborhood that we're in, and I'd like something that's more rooted in that time and place. So this weekend, Friday and Saturday, I got to attend a virtual Comic-Con, which was really great. I'm going to mispronounce his name, but it was put on by a guy named Russell Nohelty, I think is how he says it, Nohelty. Definitely worth looking up and following along, hitting some of his podcasts and other stuff. He's a USA Today best-selling author and also extremely successful Kickstarter, doing a lot of his own stuff, and he's done really good at that. I got to meet him the first time several months ago at the World Fantasy Convention, and then promptly lost all of my notes, so it was a joy to be able to go back and listen to him and some of his panelists. Anyway, it was geared toward comic book creation, although there was some prose stuff in there too. But one of the things that came up was, and I don't believe at this point that it's a formalized thing, but one of the comic book creators mentioned what they called a tone meeting, Tone, tone meeting. And they didn't go really deep into it other than to talk about, well, in this issue, we're going to focus on green. And green is going to kind of be our palette for this issue of, Harley Quinn or whatever. And then in the next issue, it's going to be kind of red. Like, okay, that makes sense talking about it visually speaking. And what font are we going to use or create for the text balloons and stuff like that. Like, the more I learn about comics, the more of an art it really is. Oh. Like, holy crap. And how thick your lines are. Like, it's just amazing. So I've got so much to learn. But that phrase, tone meeting, really leapt out at me, and I want to do some more work on it because I think it's something that could be developed for prose writers. I'll be talking about it a little bit in the next Patreon download that you guys get, for those of you who are on my Patreon. And if you're not, why not? Get on there. Let's go.
Honestly.
But this idea of taking time as a writer, as a creator of whatever, to sit down and deliberately, rather than doing any writing, in your background work, really talking through with yourself, like, okay, well, what colors would you not necessarily find in this book, but what colors do you see in this book? Like, if we go to Joey's thing, for example, let's do a tone meeting on Joey's story. Like, well, we had the red brick, so I definitely get that red, but it's a muted, it's not blood red, but it's very muted. I get a lot of gray, a lot of brown.
Gray, without a doubt.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
And even if you never use those words in your tone meeting, those might be the kinds of things you write down. Those are the kinds of things you want to evoke from your setting or from your scene. What kinds of phrases that aren't necessarily gray or brown or cobweb or dusty or whatever might you use to give us that kind of impression? What kind of smells might be in there? What is the smell of verdant? What does purple smell like? I don't know. It depends on your story, right? But having like a sheet or a couple pages maybe or something, maybe it's an Excel doc, something like that, where you kind of walk through with yourself what the dominant images are. Dominant images, what kind of word choices might you use, what kind of sentence structure might you use. I mean, can you imagine having a document going into the writing of your first draft or going into your revision where, like, you know what, I really want some of these longer sentences and to take up some of that space and to give myself permission to have some fluidity in some of these scenes. Versus, okay, in this book, which is a horror novel about a bunch of high school kids fighting monsters, I want short, choppy sentences, and I want exclamation points, and I want a lot of hard-edged words like edge and kill, as opposed to soft and satin and whatever. So anyway, like I said, I'm still kind of developing this idea. It's something I want to put together in a more formalized sort of way to help myself and then hopefully help some others. I'm just really intrigued by the idea. It's not something I've ever done intentionally. I think it's stuff that happens kind of on accident. Like, I'm going to assume Joey didn't sit down with himself and say, Joey, what do you want to do with this story? I think it probably just happened naturally, and that's fine. But imagine if we could codify it and put it, I don't want to make it clinical, but there is nevertheless still a clinical aspect to the work we do. The Firewalker thing, I think, falls into that category where, like, does it function as an image? Oh yeah, beautiful. I totally get what Joey is saying here. Does it function, clinically speaking? Is this the proper image for the setting? I would argue no, not knowing where else the story's going. So imagine having a document or something like that you could refer to that had all this stuff in there. I just think would be really cool. So I want to develop that and see where it goes. But anyway, just wanted to bring that up tonight before I forgot. And that, of course, again, that will be part of our discussion in the Patreon group, which if you're not there, you really probably should.
And I don't think it's clinical. I think it's about being intentional.
That's a better word. And I like intention
right?
a lot.
Because as storytellers, you want, correct me if I'm wrong, storytellers. I'm not often a storyteller, but I do on occasion. You want as few barriers between your story and the people who are engaging with your story.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so being intentional is not, in my estimation as a reader, as a consumer of your stories, thank you, is you want to communicate to me as clearly and succinctly,
frictionless.
Yes, exactly, as possible what the story is. Yeah. And so having decided within yourself, having decided makes a lot of sense.
I think both of our submissions tonight did that. I think that's the thing.
Yes.
Both of them were frictionless. Whatever little
Yeah.
tweaks and stuff you might have found, it's like, and off we go. And
Yeah.
you just sort of,
Yeah.
there was no question about where we were, what was happening, who was involved, like,
Right.
and an oddly, it's odd how many writers can't yet do that. It's a hard thing to do, to be that effortless, to be that frictionless,
Yeah.
I think. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. That's a great way to put it. All right, yeah, cannot tell you how thankful we are that you all tune in for this. Makes our week, I think. Certainly makes mine, so very much appreciate that. And we'll see what we talk about next week. I have no idea. Could be anything.
Could be Sarah. Could be Bob the Train.
It could be Bob the Train. We'll have to see. Oh, I'll be all right. I'll be all right. Until next week, then, and see you on Facebook and all that kind of stuff. May you be happy. May you be well. May you please be safe. And may you be peaceful and at ease. And we'll see you guys next week. Thank you so much.